Welcome to Interactive Storytelling. This third set of videos focuses on the first of the four partakers in interactive storytelling, the platform. The main challenge in developing a platform is the narrative paradox, which is the topic of this video. The next three videos will present three different approaches for handling the narrative paradox, and the last video of this set will be a review of actual platform implementations. So, what's the narrative paradox? Let's take an example. Imagine that there's a cool new interactive storytelling platform that provides you the freedom to choose whatever you want. It doesn't impose you one choice over another, but whatever you choose, the story will adapt to it. For this platform, there's a new story world available, based on a well-known franchise. Now, imagine that you're taking a part in an interactive story that takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Yes, cue in the music, the logo, and the opening crawl. I'm of course talking about the Star Wars universe, and the very first movie in the real-world chronological order, renamed after its success, Episode 4, A New Hope. Let's assume that you get to play the part of Luke Skywalker in this interactive story world. In the beginning, you're a farm boy in a desert planet called Tatooine, living with your uncle and aunt. One day, you find a part of a recorded message from a droid that your uncle has just purchased. It's a call for help for someone named Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you assume it refers to an old hermit living nearby. The droid informs you that if you would remove a restraint bolt, you could see the rest of the message. Now you are facing a choice. Do you remove the restraint bolt or not? Well, we all know what happens if you do. The droid escapes. But if you don't, what happens next? What if you're not curious to know at all, but want to continue your life in the farm as before? I mean, you do have a freedom of choice in this interactive story. Who cares about space travel and adventures when you can concentrate on harvesting the best crop ever? Did our Star Wars story world out of a sudden turn into a mixture of Farmville and Little House on the Prairie? Think about it. If you, the interactor, have a total freedom of choice, then this will be your story, if you want it. It's a story about seasons, the ups and downs of life in a farm, and your relationship with your uncle and aunt. It's a great story. Nothing wrong with that. But what about the designer of this story world who has prepared a whole galaxy full of adventures just waiting for you? Do we expect that the designer would have thought about this possibility too and provided enough content to make a dramatically compelling story out of this? You see the problem here. On one hand, there's the interactor's freedom of choice that affects the unfolding of the story. On the other hand, there's the designer's narrative that constrains the interactor's freedom. And that is the narrative paradox in a nutshell. So much noise from such a small bolt. Ruth Aylett and Sandy Lochard summarizes this. In narrative paradox, pre-authored plot structures conflict with the freedom of action and interaction characteristics of the medium of real-time interactive graphical environments. This means that the more freedom the interactor has, the less control the designer has, and vice versa. As we saw in the previous example, this can lead to the problem of internal consistency, where the interactor can act inconsistently with respect to the designer's intentions. The interactor can refuse to follow the intended story and do something else instead. Ryan describes the situation from the interactor's perspective and writes, "How can the interactor freely choose her actions if her destiny is itself controlled by godlike authority of a world designer? The story world and its setup limit the interactor's freedom. Let's take another example. Facade is an interactive drama game by Michael Matthias and Andrew Stern, published in 2005. Its story world comprises a get-together of 3 people, a married couple who are computer-controlled characters, and the player who is an old friend of the couple. The events take place in the couple's apartment, and the theme of the game is the broken-up relationship of the couple. All goes well as long as the player is willing to play their expected role. But what happens if the player refuses to follow this setup? The player could act like a zombie and march around saying only, "Brains, brains!" Or the player could act like being wounded by a gunshot and bleeding profusely and pleading the characters to dye the wounds and call an ambulance. In such a case, the story is not progressing at all. No matter how much the player is wailing in pain and agony and coughing blood, the characters keep up their casual tone and try to engage the interactor in finding more about their marital problems. I will come back to Facade again in a later video when I'm reviewing interactive storytelling platforms and applications. To solve this dissonance, which is basically reflecting the narrative paradox, Ernst Adams proposes the idea of a designer-interactor contract. Because the interactor is required to participate actively in the creation of the experience and has to make decisions that affect how the story unfolds, the interactor also has responsibilities regarding the story. Adams argues that in this situation the interactor undertakes an agreement to comply with the story, since there's a reason why the designer is leading the interactor through it. In this designer-interactor contract, the designer offers the interactor a more or less defined role to play and a set of actions that can be performed. This set of actions forms the interactive range that I talked about in an earlier video. The more freedom the designer grants to the interactor, the more possibilities the interactor has to depart from their intended role. On their part, the interactor promises to play the offered role wholeheartedly and in character. To come back to the example of playing a wounded guest in Facade, the interactor is not playing their role in character, so the interactor is, in this case, violating the designer-interactor contract. The contract agrees on mutual obligations, but doesn't include any penalty for failing to follow it. A breach of contract simply ends the agreement. If the interactor isn't playing their intended role, there's no obligation for the designer to cover this kind of sidetracking. If the interactor wants to farm land in Tatooine, that is not the designer's problem, if the interactor's intended role was to join the rebellion against the Galactic Empire. Are you satisfied with this solution to the narrative paradox? Probably not. Maybe there's a design-oriented solution that would help to avoid the narrative paradox altogether. Yes, there are actually 3 possible approaches that have been put forward. But before introducing them, let's think for a moment for possible measures to compare their qualities. To compare the approaches, Riedel proposes 2 measures for balancing the plot and character. The first measure is plot coherence. It refers to the perception that the main events of a story are causally relevant to the outcome of the story. This means that the plot progresses logically from one event to another, and the story is not just random events put together. If the causality present in the story is high, plot coherence is also high. The second measure is character believability. This refers to the perception that the events of a story are reasonably motivated by the beliefs, desires, and goals of the characters. If the events in the story world railroad on and omit the needs of the interactor and computer-controlled characters, character believability gets low because the characters' motivations go unheeded. And still one more thing before I introduce the approaches. Let's bring back our old acquaintance, the spectrum of interactivity. You might recall how on the left-hand side we have conventional storytelling, where the designer is actually an author and has a total control over the story being told. On the right-hand side, we have simulation, where there's actually no story being told, but the interactor is free to do whatever they want. Interactive storytelling resides somewhere between these extremes. The more we move to the left, the less interactive the story world becomes, and the more we move to the right, the less story-like the story world becomes. Let's now focus on this central area, the area of interactive storytelling. The first of the three approaches is located closer to the left-hand side, and it's called the author-centric approach. It's the oldest of them, dating back to the early 1990s and the Oz project. It aims at ensuring that the designer still maintains an author-like control in the story world, although it's not as absolute as in conventional storytelling. Referring to the two measures, the author-centric approach allows to have a higher plot coherence at the cost of a lower character believability. The second approach is located closer to the right-hand side, and it's called the character-centric approach. It originated in the late 1990s and early 2000s as a reaction to the problems that the author-centric approach didn't seem to be able to solve. It reduces the designer's control considerably and relies instead on the characters and stories emerging from their interaction. With respect to the two measures, here character believability gets higher at the cost of a lower plot coherence. The third approach is located between the previous ones, and it's called the hybrid approach. It originated in the 2010s, and it was also a reaction to the problems that, this time, the character-centric approach wasn't able to solve. Like the name suggests, it's a hybrid, a combination of both of the previous approaches. Likewise, the two measures are more in balance here. Okay, now we've laid the groundwork for the next three videos, where we go through these three approaches one by one. See you there.